There are people the world knows by headlines and numbers, not by who they are in quiet moments. Leonhard Weiss was one of those people. In northern Germany, inside a high-end medical center built more like a hotel than a hospital, Leonhard lay in a private room overlooking a frozen river. The room was silent except for the soft rhythm of machines doing work his body could no longer manage alone. Outside the glass, winter pressed down hard gray skies, bare trees, a city moving on without noticing him. Leonhard Weiss was not an ordinary patient. He was a self-made billionaire who had built his fortune through freight logistics, industrial software, and infrastructure deals that reshaped entire regions. He was known for sharp decisions, iron discipline, and a reputation that made boardrooms fall silent when he entered. But in that hospital room, power meant nothing. Illness had reduced him to something he hated: being dependent. He rejected food, complained about every procedure, and argued with doctors half his age. Nurses dreaded his room. Some left it blinking back tears. Others lasted minutes before requesting reassignment. He didn't shout for no reason. He shouted because fear had nowhere else to go. His family came, but briefly. Conversations around his bed were stiff and technical estate plans, company leadership, legal protections. No one asked how he felt. No one stayed long enough to hear the answer. Leonhard noticed everything: the way staff stiffened when they entered, the way voices softened unnaturally, like people speaking to a dangerous animal. He hated it, but he hated the silence even more. At night, when the machines hummed louder and sleep refused to come, he stared at the ceiling and wondered when he had become a man surrounded by people, yet completely alone. By the end of that week, the nursing station had one quiet question circulating among the staff: who is going to handle him next? None of them knew that the answer was already on the schedule. The answer arrived on a quiet morning shift. Her name was Alina Cruz, though most of the staff called her Leni. She was a Filipino nurse in her early 40s, trained, experienced, and calm in a way that couldn't be taught in school. She had grown up in a coastal town in the Philippines where storms were common and patience was learned early. When the charge nurse handed her the file for room 517, she lowered her voice. "That's Mr. Weiss," she said. "He's difficult." Leni nodded as she read the chart. Long illness. Complications. Emotional distress noted several times in the margins. She closed the folder, whispered a brief prayer under her breath, and walked down the hallway without hesitation. Outside the room, she paused not from fear, but to steady herself. Then she knocked once, not loudly, not timidly. "Come in," a sharp voice replied. She entered, adjusted the lights slightly, and spoke in clear, calm English. "Good morning, Mr. Weiss. My name is Alina. I'll be your nurse today." Leonhard barely looked at her. "Another one," he muttered. "They never last." She didn't react. She checked the monitors, reviewed the IV, and made a small adjustment. Then she did something none of the others had done. She pulled a chair to the side of the bed and sat down. "You've had a rough week," she said simply. That caught his attention. He turned his head slowly. "You don't know anything about my week." "Maybe not," she replied, "but I can see what exhaustion looks like." There was no challenge in her voice. No pity either, just recognition. For a moment, Leonhard waited for her to rush away or soften her words. She didn't either. She stayed seated, hands folded, eyes steady. Silence stretched between them. Then, unexpectedly, he spoke, not loudly, not angrily. "Everyone in this place looks at me like I'm already gone." Leni nodded. "That can make a person feel invisible." He frowned. No one had said that to him before. She stood, adjusted his pillow, and before leaving the room said one last thing. "You're still here, Mr. Weiss. And while you are, you matter." Leonhard watched the door close behind her. For the first time in days, the room felt less cold. The change did not happen all at once. It never does. The next morning, Leonhard Weiss woke earlier than usual. Not because of pain, not because of the machines, but because his mind was alert in a way it hadn't been for weeks. He glanced toward the door, unsure why he was waiting for it to open. When it finally did, and Elena's familiar figure stepped inside, something in his chest loosened. She greeted him the same way as before, no performance, no forced cheer. She checked his vitals, asked about his breathing, adjusted the bed. Ordinary actions, yet carried out with an attention that made him feel noticed rather than managed. "How was the night?" she asked. He hesitated, then answered honestly. "Long," she nodded. Long nights can feel heavier than the illness itself. That sentence opened something. Over the next few days, Leonhardt began speaking more not in long speeches, but in fragments. He spoke about sleep that never came, about the fear that arrived when the lights dimmed. He admitted that silence frightened him more than pain. Elena listened. She did not interrupt. She did not rush. When his frustration rose, she let it pass like a wave. When he grew quiet, she stayed. One afternoon, as rain tapped softly against the window, he asked her a question no one else had asked. "Do you ever get tired of taking care of strangers?" She smiled faintly. "Sometimes. But care doesn't belong only to family. Some people need it more because they have no one else close." He absorbed that quietly. Later that week, the staff noticed something unusual. Leonhardt stopped shouting. He waited when Elena said she would return in 5 minutes. He followed instructions more carefully. When doctors explained procedures, he asked questions instead of arguing, especially when Elena repeated the explanation in simpler terms. One nurse whispered in the break room, "Whatever she's doing, it's working." But what was really happening was something deeper. Leonhardt was no longer fighting everyone around him. He was fighting less with himself. One evening, while Elena adjusted his oxygen, he spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "People have always wanted something from me," he said. "Money, influence, decisions." She looked at him. "And what do you think I want?" He shook his head slowly. "I don't know," she answered gently. "I want you to breathe easier tonight." That was all. Yet those simple words stayed with him long after she left the room. For the first time in years, Leonhardt Weiss felt something unfamiliar but welcome. Relief. Change is often quiet, but it rarely goes unseen. By the second week, the atmosphere around room 517 had shifted. Doctors remarked that Leonhardt Weiss was more cooperative. Nurses no longer argued over who would cover his shift. Even the night staff noticed he slept longer, waking less frequently in distress. And then his daughter noticed. Clara Weiss arrived one afternoon in a tailored coat, tablet in hand, already mid-conversation with a lawyer on the phone. She ended the call as she entered the room. Expecting the usual scene, her father tense, impatient, ready to issue demands. Instead, she found him listening. A nurse stood beside the bed, speaking softly. Elena was explaining something small, how the weather reminded her of home. How German winters felt endless compared to the Philippines. Leonhardt's face was relaxed, almost peaceful. Clara stopped just inside the doorway. She had not seen that expression on her father's face in years. When Elena finished adjusting the four and left the room, Clara stepped closer. "Since when do you enjoy conversations?" She asked lightly. Leonhardt looked at her. "Since someone finally speaks to me without fear." That unsettled her. Over the next few visits, Clara observed more things that didn't fit her understanding of her father. She saw him thank Elena once briefly, awkwardly, as if testing a foreign language. She saw him wait patiently while Elena finished with another patient. She saw him ask her opinion before agreeing to a procedure. Trust. That was the word Clara couldn't ignore. One evening, she arrived earlier than usual and found something that stopped her completely. Leonhardt was asleep, not sedated. not restless. Asleep. Alina sat quietly beside the bed, reading from a small paperback in a low, steady voice. When she noticed Clara, she paused and closed the book gently. "He had a difficult night," Alina whispered. "Stories help." Clara nodded, unsure what to say. After Alina left, Clara sat beside her father, studying him. For the first time, she saw not a titan of industry. Not a man of control, but an aging parent who had been carrying fear alone for far too long. Later that day, Clara approached Alina near the nurse's station. "I need to ask you something," she said carefully. "What exactly are you to my father?" Alina met her gaze calmly. "I'm his nurse." "I know that," Clara replied. "But he listens to you." Alina lowered her eyes respectfully. "People listen when they feel seen." Clara didn't answer right away, because deep down she was beginning to understand. And that understanding made her uneasy. Clara Weiss was not a woman easily unsettled. She had grown up in boardrooms, learned early how to read contracts, people, and power. Emotions were things to manage quietly, not follow blindly. Yet over the following days, one thought refused to leave her mind. What happens when Alina is gone? Hospital routines were predictable. Rotations happened. No nurse stayed with one patient forever. Clara knew this logically, but logic didn't quiet the unease building in her chest. One afternoon, she waited until her father was asleep before stepping out into the corridor. Alina was updating a chart nearby. "When does your current assignment end?" Clara asked, keeping her tone neutral. "At the end of this cycle," Alina replied. "Then I move to another unit." The words landed heavier than Clara expected. "That's hospital policy?" she asked. "Yes," Alina said simply. There was no hesitation in her voice. No attempt to secure her place. No sign of ambition or attachment beyond professionalism. That unsettled Clara even more. Inside the room, Leonhardt was awake again. When Clara mentioned the rotation casually, his reaction was immediate. "She's leaving?" he asked. "Not leaving," Clara corrected gently. "Just moving to another ward." Leonhardt stared at the wall, jaw tightening. "They cannot do that." "Papa," she said carefully, "she cannot stay forever." His voice dropped. "Why not?" The question wasn't angry, it was afraid. That evening, Alina noticed the shift in him. He spoke less, ate almost nothing. His gaze followed her movements as if memorizing them. As she prepared to leave the room, he spoke suddenly. "Do you believe people are brought into our lives for a reason?" She paused. "Sometimes." "And when they leave," she considered her answer, "what they give us doesn't always leave with them." He nodded, but the tension in his shoulders remained. Later that night, when the hallway lights dimmed, Leonhardt whispered something he had never said aloud before. "I don't want to go back to how I was." Alina didn't respond right away. She placed the blanket more securely around him. "You're not that man anymore," she said softly. "Not completely." But even as she said it, both of them knew a turning point was coming. And it was closer than anyone realized. The morning it happened, Leonhardt sensed it before anyone told him. The hallway felt different, quieter. The rhythm of the day was off. When he turned his head toward the door, waiting for the familiar knock, it never came. Instead, a young nurse he didn't recognize stepped in with forced brightness. "Good morning, Mr. Weiss." He didn't respond. "Where is Alina?" he asked flatly. The nurse hesitated. "She's been reassigned, sir." Reassigned, the word echoed in his chest like something breaking loose. Minutes later, the head nurse arrived, calm but firm, already expecting resistance. "This is a routine change," she explained. "Your care will continue without interruption." Leonhardt's hands trembled. "You're wrong," he said. "She is the interruption." His breathing grew shallow. His voice sharpened. not with rage, but with panic. "Bring my daughter." When Clara arrived, she saw it immediately her father sitting upright, pale, gripping the side of the bed as if anchoring himself to the world. "She's gone," he said. "She's a nurse, Papa," Clara replied gently. "Not a possession." "I know that," he snapped, then softened. "That's why this hurts." He looked at her, eyes glassy, stripped of all authority. "She's the only one who makes this place bearable. Without her, it's just machines and waiting." Clara sat beside him, conflicted. She understood now this was not obsession or control. It was fear of slipping back into isolation. Then he said it. "If they won't bring her back, I'll change the system." Clara stiffened. "What do you mean?" "I've bought companies larger than this hospital," he replied quietly. "I can buy influence here." "Papa," she said firmly, "you can't solve loneliness with ownership." He closed his eyes. "I'm not trying to own her. I'm trying not to disappear." Before Clara could respond, the door opened. Elena stepped inside, just for a moment. Her presence shifted the air instantly. Leonhardt's shoulders dropped, his breathing slowed. The storm inside him settled. "I'm here to check on you," she said softly. He looked at her as if she were proof that the world hadn't abandoned him. "Don't do this," he whispered. "Don't leave me like this." Elena met his gaze with calm honesty. "I didn't give you strength," she said. "I reminded you that you already had it." The words hung between them, heavy and true. Outside the room, the hospital braced itself. Something was about to change. What Leonhardt Weiss faced was not a battle of power, but a battle of meaning. After Elena left the room that morning, the silence returned, but it no longer felt empty. It felt heavy, like a question waiting to be answered. Clara stayed longer than usual. She watched her father stare out the window, his reflection faint in the glass. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady, not angry. "All my life," he said, "I believed influence was the same as value. That if I could move systems, I mattered." Clara listened. "But when she sits beside me," he continued, "I don't feel powerful. I feel real." He turned to his daughter. "If I use money now, it won't be to control her. It will be to protect what this place forgets, that people are not procedures." Clara exhaled slowly. "And if she still leaves?" Leonhardt was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Then I will learn to stand without leaning on her." That afternoon, the hospital administrators received an unexpected request. Not an acquisition, not a threat. A proposal. Leonhardt wanted to fund a long-term care initiative, better staffing ratios, emotional care training, protected continuity for vulnerable patients. No names attached, no conditions tied to Elena. When Elena was informed, she was confused. "You did this?" she asked him later. He nodded. "Not to keep you. To honor what you showed me?" She studied him carefully, then smiled small, genuine. "Then you learned the right lesson." For the first time, Leonhardt Weiss felt at peace with an outcome he could not control. Because some connections are not meant to be owned, only understood. Elena completed her rotation 2 weeks later. On her final morning in room 517, there was no drama. No speeches, no tears. Just quiet routine, the kind that marks something real coming to a close. She checked Leonhardt's vitals, adjusted his pillow, and handed him a glass of water. "You're stronger now," she said. He nodded. "Because someone reminded me I could be." Before she left, he reached for her hand, not to hold it, but to steady himself. "Whatever happens next," he said, "I won't forget what you gave me." Elena smiled. "You don't need to. You're already living it." After she walked out, Leonhardt lay back and closed his eyes. The room felt different than it once had. Still quiet, still filled with machines. But no longer cold. Weeks passed. The care program he funded quietly took shape. Nurses had more time. Patients were listened to. The hospital became less efficient on paper and more humane in practice. Leonhardt's health remained fragile, but his spirit had changed. He spoke more openly with his daughter. He slept better. He stopped measuring his life only by what he controlled. And Alina. She moved on, as nurses always do, carrying her patience, her discipline, and her kindness into another ward, another life, another quiet transformation no one would ever write headlines about. Some people enter our lives briefly, not to stay, but to return us to ourselves. And that, Leonhard Weiss finally understood, was a kind of wealth no one could buy.